Okay, so picture this, right? A college student turns 500 bucks into 100 grand in
Wow.
just 30 days,
Oh, wow.
all from their laptop.
Pretty wild, right?
Yeah, that's impressive. But here's the thing that really kind of blows my mind. They didn't do it with, you know, endless ads or influencer shout outs.
Right.
It was just one platform they figured out how to tap into.
Interesting.
So today, that's exactly what we're going to dive into.
Yeah.
How do these seemingly impossible income leaps actually happen? We've got some really cool examples lined up.
Yeah.
Real world stories and frameworks to kind of break down from, explosive online growth to those businesses that might seem boring at first glance.
Right. The ones that kind of fly under the radar.
Exactly. Our goal here is to go beyond just the surface level stories, and really understand the mechanic.
Yeah, the actual how-to.
Uh,
That's key, right? Getting past the hype and figuring out the principles that anyone can actually apply.
100%.
You've got a really interesting mix of sources here. And I think what we're looking for are those patterns, the repeatable strategies that can lead to these kind of results,
Yeah.
whether it's, that rapid scaling or more consistent income.
Okay, so let's jump right in and start with this dropshipping case study.
Okay.
It's called $100 K in 30 days with dropshipping. Now, I know dropshipping can feel a little overdone.
Right. It's been around for a while.
But this example claims some pretty unconventional methods to hit that huge income spike.
Okay. I'm intrigued. What stood out to you initially about their approach?
Well, their strategy seemed super focused. It wasn't just dropshipping in general.
Yeah.
It was like they found a really specific opportunity.
Got it. So let's start with the beginning. How did they pick their product? What can we learn from that?
It sounds like they were really tuned into TikTok trends.
Makes sense. TikTok moves fast.
Right, but they weren't just chasing any viral video.
So there was more to it.
Yeah, they were also digging into data on AliExpress.
AliExpress.
Uh,
Okay. For those who don't know, AliExpress is basically a giant online marketplace.
Mm.
Mostly suppliers in China, dropshippers use it a lot to source products.
Exactly. And they weren't just looking at what was popular on TikTok, they were cross-referencing that with metrics on AliExpress
Interesting. Why do that?
to gauge the potential demand. And also things like supplier reliability.
Smart. They're doing their homework.
Yeah. And a big part of that was actively trying to identify those red flags.
Red flags. Okay. So what kind of red flags are we talking about? What should our listeners be looking out for?
Well, one of the big ones is market saturation. If everyone and their grandma is already selling the exact same product.
Right. Your chances of standing out are slim.
Exactly. And then there's shipping times.
Ugh, yeah. Huge one these days.
Customers expect things pretty quickly.
For sure.
If your supplier takes forever to ship, you're going to get hit with complaints, refund requests.
Yeah, that eats into profits fast.
Not to mention it hurts your reputation.
So a data-driven approach to product selection, combining trends with a practical look at suppliers, seems like that was their foundation.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, so what's next? How'd they set up their online presence?
All right, so this is where things get a little unconventional. Instead of building out a whole Shopify store,
Which is what most people do.
right, they went with this single-page funnel.
A single-page funnel.
Interesting. Think of it like a super streamlined landing page. Just one goal in mind, get people to buy that one winning product.
So minimize distractions, make the path to purchase as direct as possible.
Exactly. What do you think about that approach?
It's really interesting because it kind of goes against the grain.
Yeah.
A multi-page store gives you more room for browsing,
Sure.
but it can also create more friction.
Yeah.
A single-page funnel, when it's done right, can force a more immediate decision.
And they use this dumb, simple design trick to supposedly boost conversions. I'm curious about that one.
Yeah, tell me more.
Apparently, it was really basic.
Okay.
They focused on super clear, high-quality images of the product,
Makes sense.
and then made those add to cart buttons really obvious and easy to find, especially on mobile.
So even someone quickly scrolling on their phone would immediately know what to do.
Exactly. It's like the buying process was so simple that you almost couldn't help but click.
Sometimes the simplest solutions are the best ones.
Totally.
Okay.
So we've got the product, we've got the funnel, but how do you get people to that funnel without spending a ton on ads?
Right. That's often the biggest hurdle.
This is where that whole untapped platform thing comes in.
Okay, lay it on me.
Their main strategy was organic TikTok content.
Organic TikTok.
Interesting.
So they were making these short, engaging videos showcasing the product
Yeah.
and driving traffic straight from those videos to their funnel.
Okay. But the key word here is organic.
Right. Meaning they weren't paying for views.
That's impressive. It speaks to the power of finding those platforms where attention isn't completely dominated by paid ads.
For sure. But they didn't stop there. You mentioned they were also using Reddit and other online forums.
Right. How did that fit into the picture?
It seems like they were really strategic about it. Not just spamming links everywhere.
They were actually participating in discussions.
Providing value.
Exactly. Offering insights and then naturally mentioning their product when it made sense, if it actually provided a solution or was relevant to the conversation.
So almost like a targeted online version of word of mouth?
Yeah, connecting with people who were already interested in that type of product.
That's smart. Leveraging those existing engaged audiences and building trust without a huge marketing budget.
Okay, so we've got this model for rapid growth, trending product, compelling organic content, streamlined sales process.
It's a really interesting case study.
Yeah, let's switch gears completely.
We're good.
Let's talk about this idea of $50 K a month passive income from those so-called boring businesses.
All right, I'm all ears. So we're leaving the fast-paced world of online trends and diving into something a little more...
Mundane.
Yeah, mundane.
Yep.
But supposedly way more stable and profitable.
Exactly. Things like laundromats.
Laundromats.
Vending machines.
Right.
Even self-storage units.
Interesting.
Yeah.
What makes these seemingly boring businesses so lucrative?
Well, that's kind of the point. The source material argues that boring can actually be a huge advantage.
Okay, I like it. Tell me more.
They highlight a few key traits that make these types of businesses surprisingly resilient and scalable. What were some of the standouts for you?
Yeah, break it down for me.
First one that really hit me was recession-proof demand.
Recession-proof, meaning...
No matter what's happening in the economy,
Right.
people still need to do laundry.
Sure.
They're still going to want snacks and drinks,
Yeah.
and they're going to need storage space.
It's not like these are luxury items that people cut from their budget when things get tight.
Exactly. And the second key trait was low customer service needs.
Ah, okay, so less hand-holding.
Yeah, think about a vending machine.
Right.
The interaction is super minimal.
Right.
And the source actually said something like no refunds.
It's pretty straightforward.
It drastically simplifies things. You don't have to deal with as many customer issues.
Definitely lowers the stress level. What was the third characteristic?
The third point was that competitors in these spaces often just ignore innovation.
Because they're seen as like unsexy industries.
Right, and that creates a big opportunity. If you come in with even slightly more modern or efficient methods...
You can gain a real edge.
Yeah, and the source had a great example of that, the automated car wash.
Oh, yeah? The one with the 90% profit margin?
Exactly. It really brings the potential to life.
So how does automation lead to those kinds of profits in these businesses that are usually pretty hands-on?
It's all about strategically automating key processes, to reduce labor costs, which are usually a big expense.
Smart. You're transitioning from a labor-intensive model to one that's more system-driven.
Right. And that allows the owner to step back from the day-to-day operations.
Okay, so how do you actually get into these kinds of ventures? The source talk about a couple of different pathways, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, they did. The first one was acquiring an existing business.
Buying a business already up and running. Interesting. What were some of the nuances around that?
Well, they talked about looking for off-market deals.
Off-market meaning?
Businesses that aren't publicly listed for sale.
Ah, good.
Which can sometimes be a better value, less competition. The seller might be more motivated.
So how do you find those deals?
It often involves networking, reaching out to business brokers, keeping an eye on local opportunities.
The kind of stuff that might not be widely advertised.
Exactly. What about the second pathway?
The second option was building a business from scratch.
Right.
Which, for something like a laundromat or a bunch of vending machines, could seem like a big upfront investment.
It can be, but the source had a really good point about leasing equipment.
Leasing instead of buying.
Yeah, for a lot of these businesses, especially the ones that involve machinery.
Like vending machines, laundry equipment.
Exactly. You don't necessarily need to buy everything outright.
Right.
Leasing lets you get started with way less initial capital.
Okay, that makes these ventures a lot more accessible.
Much lower barrier to entry. Now let's talk about this lazy owner playbook.
That sounds intriguing. And it seems to tie directly into the idea of passive income.
It does. It's all about building solid systems and hiring good managers to handle the day-to-day stuff.
So the owner can step back and focus on the bigger picture.
Exactly. The source also mentioned using remote monitoring tools.
Things like security cameras for storage units, or maybe inventory tracking for vending machines.
Right. You can keep an eye on everything without needing to be physically present all the time.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
But what are some potential downsides to that kind of hands-off approach?
Well, it definitely requires a lot of trust in your systems and your employees.
True. You need to find and keep those reliable managers.
Yeah, and you'll still need to be involved in some level of oversight and decision making.
It's probably more accurate to call it a well-managed, less hands-on approach.
Right. Not complete passivity.
Okay, now let's talk numbers. The hypothetical $50,000 per month income. How did they get to that figure?
Their example used 10 vending machines,
10 vending machines.
each machine bringing in roughly $5,000 a month in revenue.
5,000 per machine. So that's the income side. Now what about expenses?
The source broke down the costs as well.
Okay, what did they say?
Roughly $1,000 per month for maintenance across all 10 machines,
Okay,
and about $2,000 per month for restocking all the inventory.
got it. So if we do the math,
$50,000 in revenue,
minus 1,000 for maintenance,
minus $2,000 for restocking.
leaves a net profit of around $47,000 per month.
That's a pretty amazing income from what are considered relatively low maintenance businesses.
Yeah, and the source also touched on why banks might be more willing to lend to these types of businesses.
Right.
Because they're seen as more stable and predictable.
Exactly. And they're backed by tangible assets, so banks often view them as less risky,
Compared to some of those more volatile ventures.
which can make it easier to get financing.
Makes sense.
Hmm.
All right, so we've explored two very different paths to potentially making some serious income.
Rapid online growth through dropshipping and a more steady, potentially passive income from those boring businesses.
Two very different approaches.
And the source material actually offered this unifying template for both.
Okay, what's the template?
How we made $6 in time with strategy.
How we made X dollars in a certain time frame with a specific strategy.
Exactly. How does this framework connect those seemingly different examples?
I think this template is really useful for spotting those common threads.
The underlying structure of a lot of these success stories.
Exactly. And it doesn't matter what industry or approach you're talking about, so let's break it down.
Okay.
It all starts with an intro that grabs your attention. Something like, this shouldn't have worked. Why that kind of opening?
It's like a hook, right? It immediately makes you curious.
Yeah, it suggests that the outcome was unexpected.
Like they defied conventional wisdom.
It makes you want to understand how they pull it off.
Okay. Then we move on to Act 1, the aha moment.
What happens in this stage?
This is where they reveal the core strategy.
The big idea.
Yeah, the unique insight or approach that led to their success. It's that we tried this crazy thing and it actually worked moment.
And then Act 2 focuses on the rollout.
This is where we see how they put that idea into action.
The practical steps.
Exactly. And importantly, this part usually includes the challenges, the setbacks,
The mistakes, the adjustments.
those crucial early wins that keep you motivated.
It shows that success is rarely a straight line.
And finally, Act 3, the monetization.
This is where things get specific about how the strategy actually made money.
Yeah, the rubber meets the road in terms of revenue.
So for the dropshipping example, it's the sales from that single page funnel.
Right. And for the vending machine scenario, it's the income from each machine.
It provides the concrete details of how that strategy translated into actual financial results.
So whether it's those quick online sales or building a network of offline assets,
These stories often share a similar structure.
that's a powerful insight in itself.
Hmm.
Now let's shift gears and talk about our listener. What are some actionable steps they can take based on what we've discussed?
Okay, so let's say that rapid online growth model caught your attention.
The TikTok and focused funnel approach.
A tangible first step this week could be to spend some time exploring trending products on TikTok.
See what's gaining traction.
Start brainstorming those potential product niches that might have untapped potential.
And if you're more drawn to the idea of that stable, potentially passive income from boring businesses.
And you've got even a small amount of capital to work with, maybe around $10,000.
Consider doing some research into low competition service-based businesses in your area.
See what's out there.
What the initial investment looks like, the potential revenue streams.
So whether we're looking at online trends or offline businesses, it really raises a bigger question.
It does. What core shifts in traditional business thinking do these examples suggest are now possible? It's something to ponder.
Absolutely. And for those who want to dive deeper into the specifics,
Yeah.
the original material we used has some great resources, like detailed product research guides and checklists for evaluating those boring business opportunities.
Really valuable tools to guide your own exploration.
Exactly.
I think that's a great place to wrap up for today.
I agree.
Thanks for joining me for another deep dive.
My pleasure.
We'll catch you on the next one.